you needed 9 to get an indictment. So if there were 8 for an indictment, there would still be no true bill if it was 8-4 or 7-5. So we don't know what the vote is. The impression that's been given by the prosecuting attorney is that it was a collective decision by the grand jury, and this grand jury would like to talk about that amongst other things.
The officer-involved shooting that sparked nationwide protests. Demand for justice. A grand jury meets and makes the call. No indictment. And a series of riots rocked the nation, led by a band of race baiters seeking more fame and fortune. Now, one grand juror is suing the prosecutor, criticizing the way evidence was presented to the grand jury and seeking a court's permission to speak openly about the way the case was handled. It's a pleasure to welcome back to MidPoint from the law offices of O'Brien and Ryan, LLP in Philadelphia, and our resource for all things legal, Heather Hansen. Heather, good to see you again. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Ed.
All right, let's get started because and I think you and I are on the same page with this Ferguson juror. The very first moment I heard it, the words that came to mind were TV deal, book deal.
Book deal.
How was I?
Same thing here. I couldn't agree more. And you know, it's interesting, if you read the complaint, most of what the juror ultimately wants to say is contained in the complaint. And so to sort of make this case that they want to come out and say this for helping with the racial discussions that are going on, or to make some legislative change rather, to me is disingenuous. The real reason here is for, in my mind, either a book deal or a TV deal.
Well, let's make it very clear to people who don't understand, because there is freedom of speech and many people will say you have to have that available. But wait, this is a grand juror and there is a different set of circumstances that involve every single member of a grand jury panel, correct?
That's right. In Missouri, there's 4 different statutes that say that what happens in a grand jury has to be secret. And there's a number of reasons for that. It's to protect the witnesses, but it's also to protect the grand jurors. And here especially, where you have grand jurors that clearly would be subject to a lot of questioning, a lot of perhaps some pushback, it is really to protect them as well. You know, you have one grand juror who wants to come forward, but the rest may not. And so to protect them and to be compliant with the law, it is better that it be kept secret. If they want to change the law, then that's another way to go about it. But what happened in this grand jury does not have to come out in public in order for that to happen.
What happens if somebody then is a grand juror, and I think you and I know that this very well may happen as well. They're a grand juror, they say, we didn't say anything, we kept our oath. However, a leak will happen, a book will come out, an unauthorized source. Can then the law, in any stretch of the imagination, go after the author and then try to dig deeper and find the individual here if such a book or film deal comes out?
Absolutely. If one of the grand jurors tries to secretly let go of what happened in that jury room, absolutely, it's a misdemeanor. They could actually spend jail time. Now, whether or not a prosecutor would actually go forward and do that is a little bit more questionable. But here, it is definitely a case where they would want to think long and hard about doing so, because you're putting the other grand jurors in jeopardy. And given the amount of time that they put to this case, given the amount of effort that they put to this case, in my mind, they really need to be protected. The other thing that's interesting about this case, Ed, is that the complaint says in both counts 24 and 34 that this grand jury was not unanimous rather. And so they're already in this complaint giving some tips of the hand as to what happened in that room. So it is better that this be cut off at the bud. I hope that this court quickly denies this petition and that this case remains something that's completely confidential.
All right, let's spin to something that I guess should have been kept confidential. The TV show is called New York Med. Dr. Mehmet Oz is an executive producer, if you will, a star, if you will, involved in the show. And here's a case of a woman whose husband died 16 months earlier. She turns on the television and sees a version of New York Med. The face is blurred out, but it was her husband actually dying in the emergency room. My God, even I know there has to be some sort of law against this.
It's amazing. Whenever I see these shows, I'm always shocked at the fact that they're even able to produce them, because all of this information is so heavily protected under what's called HIPAA law that doctors can't even talk in the elevator about their cases without worrying about violating HIPAA law. Now here, most of these people who are involved in the TV show signed consents that say that they're allowing it to be televised. The TV show's position on this particular woman and her husband who had passed away was that he was not identifiable. identifiable. However, you can hear his voice, and if you know the circumstances of his death, he certainly was identifiable. The family made a bunch of complaints. They made some complaints with the state. They also filed a lawsuit. The lawsuit has been dismissed because of the specifics of the law in New York. But the complaint that was made with the state, they actually did sanction the hospital and say that, you're not in compliance with some of our privacy regulations, and you're not in compliance with your own policies with regard to privacy. So this is something that any hospital, any doctor's office that's going to be involved in this type of TV show or even marketing needs to be so careful about.
Isn't the first time the Dr. Oz has been involved in something shaky here in the last year or so. Let's go ahead and turn to Boston now. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev is on trial, second day of jury selection now. But you came up with something that I hadn't really heard yet, that the way things have been set up to this point, you think that an appeal got to be automatic now, and even more, it's being set up for an appeal.
Well, absolutely. Whenever you have a death penalty case, you know that there's a good chance of many, many, many appellate reviews because it's such a serious thing. But here we've already had, the defense had requested more time to get ready for this case, and they cited all of the various death penalty cases that had a much greater amount of time to prepare for trial. The judge denied that motion. The defense had also moved to have the venue changed, to have it tried not in Boston, where it happened, but either in Springfield, Massachusetts, D.C., New York. That too was denied. Now, whether or not those rulings are correct is for us to debate it another day. What it definitely does, though, Ed, is it sets us up for a definite appeal if, in fact, he is given the death penalty.
All right, I only got 30 seconds left. Interesting story. Swiss guys set up a bot on the net to go out and buy things. They wound up buying ecstasy pills. If your robot buys something that's illegal, then are you held liable?
It is an amazing story, and the thing is, first of all, I didn't realize that you could set up robots to go on the black market and use bitcoins to buy things. I mean, what our world is coming to and expanding to is just so interesting, but it's also scary, and it also opens us up to what should be some changes in the law. Most laws have an intent requirement, so you have to want to or plan to commit this crime. Others are more about recklessness. So what I compare this to, if you send your robot out to buy whatever it wants and it ends up buying things illegally, it's sort of like if you do something when you are under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
There you go.
So there's going to be some impact.
You may be held accountable in court. Don't let your bot get away with it, indeed. Heather, we're all out of time.
That's
Thanks
right.
so much for joining us. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. And after the break, MidPoint continues.